On today's episode, I have Gordon Kennedy. This was really, really special. First of all, I've had so many people on this show that have incredible legacies and have done incredible things. But when I was doing research about Gordon before having him on here, I was even getting overwhelmed in the sense of all of the things that him and his family have all accomplished. And it was interesting because his last name is Kennedy. And when you think of the Kennedys, you think of the Kennedys, you know, the political dynasty in a sense. And what's so funny is I can draw so many parallels into the fact that they are a music industry dynasty. And they helped shape this industry with everything that they've all accomplished and what they continue to do. The story behind his father, and I was able to talk to him after we finished and tell him how two songs of which his father played on, which was Pretty Woman and Chantilly Lace, is two songs that directly affected our family. And my sister's named after Chantilly Lace. And Pretty Woman is one of my mom's all-time favorite songs. So this is just like a really cool moment for me to be sitting down next to somebody who's directly affiliated with so much, I don't even know, respect, legacy, something that it will always be remembered. And that part is incredible. Hearing him just speak about his father and his admiration for him and how close they are. And then that story at the very beginning that you're going to hear about Tommy Emmanuel and them meeting and him being nervous to meet him. But then when he finds out who his father is, he wants to get into his car and go meet his dad and play music for him. That is just shows you the immense amount of respect I believe this family has. And I think it's just, I mean, I'm speechless kind of hearing even stories about Elvis and other things that you just don't think you're going to sit down with somebody and have these discussions. I really loved how much respect he has for the art of music and for musicians and playing the guitar and the gear that goes in behind it. It might not be something for everybody, but you can tell how much passion and love he has for this, because he doesn't even think he would want to do anything else other than this. And coming from a family like his, I get why. But then if he was going to do something, which was so sweet, he said, I'd be a part of creating, cartoons, Looney Tunes. And it just shows you that how playful and a kid at heart he is, and how much he respects the art of something in the entertainment industry. And he has an admiration for Nashville, which is exactly what we want out of the songwriters and people in this city. This city is so special for the art of music, and he has such a respect for that. And to know that he still thinks that Nashville still has that respect for the songwriting community is really hopeful for me to hear, because I will say there are moments in time where I feel that I'm not sure if that's so true all the time anymore. And so for him to sit here and say that he genuinely believes that respect for the songwriting community is still very, very prevalent and very important, that gives me a lot of hope into thinking that, my generation and moving forward, we will continue to have that respect for the songwriting community. I loved hearing about the song Change the World for Eric Clapton and the struggle it took to get to Eric Clapton, and how it was first recorded by Winona and it didn't work, and then they just kind of shelved it and didn't think anything of it. For it all to come around full circle, to know it was a hit, he really felt it in his bones that it was a hit, and it to eventually win Song of the Year at the 1997 Grammys. If that's not an intuition of, I don't know what is, because he just knew. And I think when you are a true artist the way Gordon is, there are things that you can't explain. And I was so, so, so grateful to have a legend like Gordon sitting on the couch today to share stories that hopefully you guys will all find just as entertaining and special as I do. Gordon Kennedy, thank you so much for being here.
Tiffany, nice to meet you, and thanks for having me.
It's really an honor. By the time I started doing more, in-depth research on you, I was just thinking to myself who I was about to be sitting down next to. And I've had so many guests on the show between season 1 and now season 2, and I really feel like you've got to be.
Well, I saw the names of people that you've interviewed before, and I feel like I'm in pretty great company there. I'm very blessed and fortunate to be on the list with them.
Oh, well, again, thank you so much for being here. I want to first start off by asking you, because I know you have so many stories and I can't wait to get into them, is what is the last most exciting thing you've experienced or at least witnessed here in Nashville?
Oh gosh, it just happened 3 weeks ago.
Oh.
George Gruen, who has Gruen's Guitars, wanted me to come into his store to play some guitars that bear his name on the headstock, and I kind of put it off for about a month and a half, and then I had this twinge of guilt a few Tuesdays ago, and voice kept saying, get in there, go down there and try these guitars. And so I went in, played the guitars, but as I'm sitting there, I hear this guy holding court at the sales desk behind me, and I think to myself that he's not from around here. And I turn around, and it's Tommy Emmanuel. And so I looked at him and went, oh, I got to meet this guy. And as I start to, go towards him and thinking, what's my opening line? How am I going to do this? What's he like? All these other guys were getting there first. Can I get my picture? You remember when you played this show? And Chris Farley, him. And so he was so nice to everybody that encouraged me to, oh yeah, I'm going to wait and meet this guy. And when I finally started talking to him, the only thing I could get out of my mouth was that I'm a fan and I play guitar. And he said, that's great. And he got to talking about Chet Atkins and Jerry Reed. And when he mentioned Jerry Reed, I said, yeah, I grew up with that family, very close to them growing up. And I said, you probably know my dad, Jerry Kennedy. And he, of course. Mm-hmm. And so he says, at some point, talking about my dad, is your dad still with us? I said, oh yeah. I said, he's in a assisted living place over in Green Hills. I'm leaving here to go visit him when I'm finished here. He goes, well, can I go over there and play him some songs?
You're kidding.
That's what I said. And he said, I'll follow you over there right now.
You're kidding.
He followed me over there. And I'm reeling from all of this. I called my dad. I said, I'm coming to visit and bringing Tommy Emmanuel. Of course, my dad's, y'all come on, And so I get in the car and I'm thinking, I can't believe he's following me. My phone rings again. It's my dad. And I'm thinking, do not cancel this. And I look down and I pick up the phone. Dad, he goes, hey, I know you're on your way over here, but I just wanted to let you know that Pete Wade just passed away. Mm-hmm. Great session guitar player who Dad used on electric for many, many, many years and has a great history as a session guy in Nashville. Also was on the first sessions I ever played when I was a kid. So there was this moment, and then there was this other moment that was coming in to sort of lift my dad's spirits. Also, the timing was great. Mm-hmm. It was wonderful. And of course, Tommy went in and I thought, is he going to play my dad a song? He played about 8 songs.
Wow.
And it wasn't like he was he was performing. And so it blew my mind. And I remember,
Well, I have a really big relationship with God and my faith. And I think that's a God thing. It's like before your dad even knew he was about to receive that news. And then
Tommy and I agreed that it was a God moment. Wow. And the fact that I put it off for so long, I would have missed that moment had I gone on time earlier. And also, I think the way I would tag it even further is that I got to experience what it was like when somebody, and many people ask, can you come do performing songwriter gigs, fundraisers and things, St. Jude's and Brightstone and Musicians on Call and just go on and on and on. And I always say yes, 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 to everything. I got to be on the receiving end of that for a change when Tommy said, can I go do this? I didn't even ask him, but I got to be on the receiving end of somebody using that kind of a gift. Mm-hmm. And boy, does he have that. Volunteering.
Well, and that also says what a great amount of respect people have for your father.
Of course.
That he wanted out of his day to drop whatever he was going to be doing next to say, I need to get in my car and I need to go over there. After
he played, he kissed my dad's hand and said, this has made my day, to my dad.
Wow.
So now I was a fan of the music and his talent. Now I'm a fan of the man.
Wow.
On top of that.
That's that is exciting.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of family, in the midst of reading about you, it's insane how much your family is so influenced and a part of the music industry, starting from your father to your mother to both of your brothers, now your children. I kind of want, I don't care how long it takes to do this, but it could be a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to break down each family member and give just a teeny bit of what they do in the music industry and what they did? Because I think this is insane what kind of a dynasty you come from, the Kennedy family.
Do you edit this?
Oh, we do. We do.
All right, because I can give you the story and then feel free to make it a mini series or, make it whatever you need to do. But so it goes back to my father. I grew up knowing a few details about his life, and the main ones were that he was 9 when he got his first guitar lesson. Mm-hmm. He was also 9 when his father died. And my dad, the oldest of 3 kids, the only boy in the family, I figured, okay, he's the man of the house, the 9-year-old kid. And I knew when I came into the world and growing up and met Tillman Franks, who gave my dad that first guitar lesson. When I met Tillman, he said, yeah, your daddy, when he came back for his second lesson, knew more than his teacher did. So we knew that Dad was good early on and was a quick learner. But it wasn't until I had a phone conversation with my grandmother at some point. I've got a family of my own at this point. The chronology of the events and how it took place. On a Friday, my grandfather, because I asked her whose idea was it for Dad to get his first guitar lesson. That was his dad's idea. Oh, okay. And I'm named after him. He was a deputy sheriff in Caddo Parish, Shreveport. And it was his idea to take Dad, asked him, how would you like to get a guitar lesson? So he took him on a Friday and dropped him off. Tillman taught my dad how to play a song called How Far Is Heaven? And my dad comes home that Friday and goes to find some, quiet corner of the house to practice so he can surprise his dad later that weekend, and plays the song for him. And then Monday, my grandfather was in a car transporting some prisoners and had a blood clot, hit his heart, and died instantly. And so, there's 9-year-old Jerry Kennedy. What's he going to do? And the fact that 3 days prior he had been put on the path he'd be on the rest of his life. That's what I learned from a phone call with my grandmother. And so I know a lot of the history about how she continued, and single mom, 3 kids, walking to work at a bakery. She wouldn't take the car that the police offered her, which was probably because he was driving that car. I imagine. I never asked her that. But so he keeps taking lessons from Tillman. And at some point, maybe I think at the ripe old age of maybe 11 or so, gets a record deal as an artist with RCA Victor. And he's making records like 16 Chickens and a Tambourine. And I think Chet played on one of the early sessions, when they did. I think the first session he did was over in Texas, but then came to Nashville at some point to do some more. And it's still a kid, and Chet's out there playing guitar, So I'm sure that had a big impression on him. And then on into his teen years, he was still an artist and singing some kind of almost rockabilly kind of things, but he would perform routinely on the Louisiana Hayride. Mm-hmm. And at some point, somebody said, you need to do a duet with this artist, Linda Brannon. And she's on Ram Records in Shreveport. And they put them together to perform on the Hayride, and they do a duet on Who Wears Short Shorts?
Yeah.
And they do that, and it goes over well. And they said, you guys got to do that again. And so they did again. I think subsequently performed it again. And at some point, they started dating, got married at 17, and had me at 19, and moved to Nashville at the request of Shelby Singleton, another Shreveport guy who had come to Nashville, and said, if you want to do something in the music business, this is where it's starting to blossom, and you need to come here. So they came to Nashville in March of '61, and they're going to give it a month. I think my dad told me they're going to give it a month.
Give it a month.
Yes.
Wow.
Give it a month. So if it's not happening at the end of a month, so at the end of a month, they had packed a U-Haul to go back to Shreveport because they were missing home, and it wasn't happening fast enough. So at the point where they're about ready to get in the car to drive back, Shelby Singleton pops in again and says, stop. Mercury Records, which is, home office in Chicago, is going to open a Nashville office, and they want me to run it, and says to my dad, I want you to be my number 2 guy. I'll pay you $100 a week. And they were renting a house for $75 a month. So, and he said, he told me later, he said it ended up being that he paid me $70 a week. But they were still able to stay in Nashville because of that. And then the only other thing I would add about the thing that sort of caused my dad's landing gear to come up, and he's off and running, was a car wreck that Hank Garland was involved in. This unbelievably great guitar player that was getting a lot of work in Nashville. So at the point where he wasn't able to answer the bell for, a time, my dad's phone started ringing off the hook. So he started playing more and more sessions. And he was playing on a bunch of records that and then I think when he was 24 years old, became the head of Mercury Records office, Nashville, and signed as a new artist to Mercury Records, Roger Miller.
At 24, he was running Mercury Records.
Yeah. And so, and I remember those days going to that office. It was a little duplex on 16th, and each side, 2 front doors, each side were 3 rooms deep. And then the alley behind it and RCA Records on the other side, which also happens to be where I met Roger Miller for the first time when I was, this big, probably 5 or 6 years old. And I just knew that I was going to meet the Dang Me guy, and Roger in his car with the window, he rolled the window down. And Dad was flagging him down. Hey, why don't you meet my boys? And we were gawking at him when he said his piece and then put the car in reverse and floored it in a gravel alley in a hail of gravel dust going backwards down. And we were just, we met Roger Miller, So, but I mean, those are the early,
right.
The sort of the door busting open at some point for my father. And I always, I'm mindful to tell people that I remember and I hear, my peers, the kids I grew up with, sharing favorite family moments. It might be sitting in front of the TV watching Partridge Family or Brady Bunch shows and things like that. And my family, me and my 2 brothers, and Mom and Dad, all in the den and staring at a reel-to-reel tape machine spinning. And whatever fresh he had done in the studio that day, either, the artist he was producing in the early days, like Roger, Jerry Lee Lewis, and at some point the Statler brothers, and he signed Reba, her first record deal, and I played on some of those early records. I played on her first top 5 and then her first #1 record, and he worked with Tom T. Hall, signed him, Johnny Rodriguez, and I could go on and on and on with the discography. But, but I mean, he was splitting his time between playing sessions and then producing, and then at some point it was producing and then playing some, and then kind of, before he retired, he was probably just producing mostly, still would play occasionally on the things he was producing.
Okay, so and of course we're going to get into you, don't get me wrong. So we've got your dad and your mom. Now, you're both your brothers.
Yeah.
They're both in the music industry, and one has written a few #1s, one for Garth and one for...
Yeah, now, so Shelby, the youngest, has a #1 with Reba McEntire.
And is that the theme song for her?
Her TV show that was on.
Yes, the I'm a Survivor.
With Philip White. They wrote
goodness.
that. But his other cut, bless his heart, is Janie Fricke and Ray Charles did a duet on a song called Who Cares? So those are a couple nice feathers in your cap there.
And then Brian,
again, has only managed to get maybe, 15, 16 cuts or something. I haven't counted, but by Garth Brooks. So Brian's cuts are spread across 164 million albums or whatever,
Unbelievable. And then to go even further down the family tree, now both of your kids, your son and your daughter, are both in the music industry themselves, right?
Well, now my daughter, she is right at the moment, she's doing the doula thing.
Okay.
And for a while she was with Bella Babies and was a photographer taking pictures of newborns.
Oh, how sweet.
So she loves being around babies, and she's great at that. She's such a nurturing soul. But she also did a stint at Music Health Alliance. So, and worked at ASCAP. Wow. So she's a Nashville girl, and she can play a few chords, and I remember when she was very young, the sound, what's that coming from down the hall? And it was this little girl strumming a guitar and singing Folsom Prison Blues, you know. So yeah, it's in her blood. And then my son, he is a great mandolin player. I mean, he's just like plays Bach. I remember when he told me he needed to get a mandolin because you can play Bach on the mandolin. And I just kind of scratched my head, looked at my wife and said, I'm not going to argue with him. I'll help him get a mandolin. And after he got a mandolin, 2 weeks later was playing the cello suite by Bach on the mandolin. So he still plays and like played a wedding this past weekend down in Chattanooga. But he's also a luthier, and his goal is his dream is to build them. He wants to build mandolins.
Wow.
So, you know, he's done some luthier work for some various companies, probably maybe the finest experience so far to date is the Benedetto guitars out of Savannah, Georgia. These guitars are works of art. I have a review out of a magazine where the guy reviewing one of their guitars said, I really don't know how to begin this review because this is the closest thing to perfection I've ever touched with a guitar. He said, I don't know where to begin. So, but he's got some great experience from there and some other places. But he's wanting to be a one-man show at some point, building his own mandolins. And in fact, he's about, I'd say 90% done with a little shop he's putting in his basement to do that.
Incredible.
So at some point you'll see Kennedy mandolins. As I was joked with him, I said, you ought to call it Man Dylan because his name is Dylan, but he's going to go with Kennedy.
Well, that's because I think that that's just paying homage to the incredible lineage of family and success that you guys have had all together. And was there any point in time, and I know you kind of said that you never had another plan, but did you ever think you were going to not be in the music industry?
No.
If you weren't going to be in it, what was something that you, from afar, you said, that looks fun, I would like to do that?
I've only uttered this phrase maybe a couple of times. If I hadn't done music, the only other line of work that I think that could have given me the same joy, you know, if I were to be able to just say, I would like to be it would have been to be on a team or the team of people that produced the Looney Tunes Warner Brothers cartoons. I think I would have loved every aspect of a job like that. And he wouldn't call that a job, you know?
No, yeah. So, I think that my always dream is, and I know that you've been a part of some things in Disney, and my always dream has always been about, I would have been, my mom worked at Disneyland. So she was like, she played Cinderella in the Electrical Parade. So I was like, if I could have done that, I would have done that because that would have made me happy for the rest of my life.
Well, see, I think that's something what we're saying is we want to stay a kid.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, we want to stay a kid forever. And I think, you know, I even looked at a picture the other day of me at 15 years old, and my dad had given me a Fender Telecaster for Christmas, which was like, that was the moment for me where I knew there was no going back or no anything else. I'll see the world. I'll see y'all later. I'll be over here. So, you know, I saw this picture the other day for the millionth time, but this time it hit me different. I looked at it and said, that's me practicing for Vegas because I'm playing a gig with Garth Brooks in Vegas right now. But I'm 15 years old. But I'm still that same person in that picture. I get to do that all these years later, you know. So I think, I don't know. I think it would have to be something where I could have stayed a kid, you know, in some respects. So the Looney Tunes thing, I've always been fascinated by that as a form of art and entertainment, and just marvel at what they did back in those, you know, those years ago.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Would you say there was any level of competition in your family because everybody...
There was confusion because
especially between your brothers, I would think.
Well, yeah, but I think it wasn't as far as a musical competition as much as it was just three boys trying to establish their own identity. Mom wants me and Brian to dress alike for a number of years, puts the same clothes on both of us. And can I wear something different? You know, I mean, those kinds of things naturally creep in and invade the brotherhood at some point, you know. But when I say confusing, it would be because we would, as you know, Dad was an executive with Mercury Records, and all the affiliated labels under that umbrella we would get boxes of albums that would come to the house, you know, I guess maybe quarterly or something, maybe twice a year, quarterly, huge boxes of vinyl records, and we'd tear into that thing, all three of us at the same time, like soldiers getting letters from home. I always think of it that way. And I'll take Bachman Turner Overdrive and Rush, and he's got Mo Bandy, and this one's getting Confunction and the Bar-Kays, and everybody goes to their rooms and drops the needle at the same time. And my dad's standing in the hall going, "What is going on?" Because it's just chaos, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but that was something that was kind of funny. Everybody had their favorites, and kind of each one bent towards something that they liked musically that maybe was a little different. As far as when we would go off on our own paths. But I mean, all roads keep doing, you know, reconnecting over the years, and styles.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, gosh, if you liked rock music in the 70s, you know, you probably like country music now, you know, and so there's a lot of cross-pollination that over the years, and, you know, the stuff Shelby was listening to in his bedroom has kind of crept into country music too, because you got guys doing hip hop kind of stuff in country, and so, and then, you know, and then there was Dad's car and Mom's car. We'd get him Dad's car, and he would have the 8-track tapes of, it would be Ray Charles doing the country and Western hits, or it would be 50s like Fats Domino, Little Richard, Chuck Berry. And you get Mom's car, and it would be Otis Redding, Aretha Franklin, Junior Walker, and All Stars.
Very well-rounded family.
Aretha. So, you know, I was inundated as a child with a steady diet of so many different styles of music. Dad would bring home the, you know, Roger Miller sessions, but then he'd also have this record by the Lovin' Spoonful, Nashville Cats. He would fall in love with a record and bring it home. And so we were always listening to what he was doing, but then he would bring me the first Beatles records, you know, their albums. So I've always, as a writer, always tend to think all these years later that I've got Roger Miller sitting here and the Beatles sitting right here, duking it out over who's going to affect this song the most that I'm working on as a writer. And so, but it was just a great house to grow up in because music. I mean, it was
I was talking about you and your family with people that I work with on the podcast. I was like, I just want to know what like a holiday dinner looked like, or a kid's birthday party. The people that were invited to these things.
Yeah.
You had to have just a great group of people. I feel like most people who are not in the music industry really wouldn't want to come because they would feel like they don't have much to offer.
No, you know, sadly, kids will be kids. And if I remember getting all the kids in my class together for what might have been maybe my 11th birthday or something like that, and my mom and Dolores Day trying to play music, get all of us dancing, and all the kids are just staring at them like no, you know. So I wouldn't say that it wasn't like the happening place to be kind of thing, you know. I mean, I do remember, you know, when we were kids, it was still a time when we would actually phone your friends and say, you got to come over and listen to this record. So it wouldn't be groups of kids, but it would be maybe one or two or your friends or whatever, or Dan Huff, you know, and I would go over to each other's house and spin records and learn guitar parts, and had a band in high school. So, you know, that's the place I wanted to go, was to dance. Or, you know, I remember going to Jerry Reed's house to rehearse with a band that his daughter, Sedina, sang lead in, to play the first time I was ever going to play in public. You know, we would practice at Jerry Reed's house. Well, guess who would walk in while we were practicing? Scare the crap out of me. Jerry Reed would walk in. Son, turn that thing up. That's what they come to hear. And he would scare me to death turning my amp up. I don't want anybody hearing what I'm doing, you know. Yeah. But so those are the things I remember more about, you know, as far as just, oh gosh, I was in Jerry Reed's house when I was a kid, or I actually went to his house when he lived in a mobile home, you know. So I think about things like that, but it wasn't like we had a scene.
I get it.
You know, like
I
that.
Get it.
Yeah.
I had read previously about, because I know your father played guitar on some Elvis Presley things, and that is already mind blowing. I believe I read a story about you at it. Were you at an Elvis show? You never been to an Elvis show? Then it was your father.
Or a session.
Oh, you never.
No, Dad. The first encounter with Elvis was when Dad was playing for Johnny Horton. Johnny Horton would take Tillman Franks on bass and Tommy Tomlinson on electric guitar, and then my dad and mom would go out and open for Johnny sometimes, and then Johnny would keep my dad on to play in his band. Still no drummer in that band, by the way. So, but he remembers doing a show somewhere where they'd set up and were ready to do the show. I don't know if the doors had opened, the crowd were coming in or whatever. But he was sitting on the loading dock behind the stage having a cigarette when a car pulls up and a guy in a military garb gets out and it comes up to him and goes, "Hey, are you working the back door?" And my dad explained to him something like, "I'm playing the show," or I don't really work. I'm not the security or whatever. And he said, "Well, Elvis is here and wants to see Johnny." And then all the doors of the car open and they all get out and start coming in. And so Dad's like, he's got to go. And he says, the guy bothered to say he doesn't want anybody to know he's here. He just wants to watch from the side. And so Dad figures he better let Johnny Horton know that Elvis is here. He doesn't want to be known. Well, I guess they get about 3 songs into the show and Johnny can't help it. He goes, "We've got a very special guest.
Oh.
His mama, this, that, and the other, and he's serving in the army, and all this stuff." Well, and he said, "Elvis Presley," and Dad said the show was over. The crowd just started rushing toward the front of the stage. He said, "I yanked the cable out of my guitar and went out the back and never saw the place again." And then, of course, he would get to share that story with Elvis in the studio.
Wow.
Some handful of years later here in Nashville. You remember when this happened? And they had to laugh over it.
That is really incredible, because my sister, anything Elvis, like my family as well, is like a huge fan. So I was like very interested to sit down and hear any Elvis stories you had. Because
and Dad played on Good Luck Charm. Mm-hmm. And he also played on the Kissin' Cousins soundtrack and tells me that one of the songs he did with a banjo. I don't know. I was like, I need to ask him, whose banjo was it? Because he doesn't have a band or never had a banjo. Need to find out some more about that. But
so you mentioned on that Christmas that he gave you the Fender.
Mm-hmm.
You were also gifted a guitar that he played on multiple sessions with Roy Orbison and Elvis, I believe. And that guitar is now at the Hall of Fame.
Musicians
right?
Hall of Fame.
So does that guitar plan on staying there, or do you plan on having it be gifted down in the family?
Okay. He gave me that guitar years ago. Basically, he just was like, "What's mine is yours," on, because he knew I was going to play sessions. Yeah. Thus the name. So, I was using that guitar and then my Telecaster on probably 75% of the session work I was doing early on. And at the point in 2007 when Joe Chambers, loved Joe Chambers for what he did for this town and for these people, the session players especially, he started the Musicians Hall of Fame. And so in 2007, they inducted groups of players. So it was the Funk Brothers for all the Motown, the Memphis Boys, the Nashville A-Team, the Wrecking Crew, Johnny Cash's original 2 and Elvis's original 3 that did his first session. All went in the same year. And Joe Chambers says to me, "Well, we're going to want to display your dad's 335. And I was like, "Oh, no." You might as well have been saying, we want to amputate your...
A little bit, yeah.
So, but, so I'm sitting there going, well, Dad deserves this honor and this place in the museum, and they want that. So, yeah, we put the guitar behind glass in 2007, after that first induction ceremony, and I'm making do, missing it. But, still, this is a very cool thing that's happened. And by the way, that was the greatest show I've ever seen in my life, that concert where they inducted those players. So anyway, 2010 is starting to get near or started or whatever, and Joe calls me and says, the city's going to take away our building for the new convention center. So I've got to relocate. And for a while they were thinking, should they move it, like permanently move it to LA, Austin, all these different places. I'm like, oh no.
Don't move it from the city.
Don't move it from Nashville. So, but while they were doing that, he said, they're starting to, bring in construction gear and everything. And literally one of the last instruments taken out of the old location was my dad's guitar, because he would say, come get it Monday. Oh, back up. He called me and said, do you want me to store your dad's dobro and the 335 with the rest of the instruments here that I'm going to store, or do you want to come get it? I didn't even let him finish the sentences. I'm coming to get it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, which I'm glad I did. But anyway, he kept saying, come Monday. And then he would call me Sunday and say, can you wait till Wednesday? I got another tour coming through. And he kept letting people come by. By the time I went down there, I looked like a mouse in a maze going around these concrete barriers. And his was the last building standing for a block, and, dust everywhere. I walked in, he had a camera crew to film me picking up the guitar he was still sort of making his plight known to the city, that they're taking the building and where we're going to go next. For a while he was told he was going to have space in the new convention center, but that got yanked away at some point. But anyway, I went and picked up those instruments, and everything he stored went into the Nashville flood.
Oh.
Yeah. So when that flood happened, that guitar was at my house, and that dobro was at my house.
There are a lot of things that have happened to you for timing purposes that are just can't be explained other than that's a God thing.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I tell people that so you probably heard the phrase, God doesn't call the equipped, God equips the called. And this has been a calling that's on my life, and the way instruments have found their way into my hands, be it from my dad or some generous, manufacturer that would love to see this in that show, those kinds of things. Or the fact that my dad gave me that guitar. I didn't ask for a guitar for that Christmas. He'd given Brian and myself the Silvertones when we were 4 and 2. And Brian couldn't put the guitar back in the case yet. He was trying to put the neck end into the body.
Could imagine, yeah.
And getting ticked, beating that thing. And then I don't know what happened to those, but later, a few years later, we get these guitars called Decca, and they didn't even have cases, but they just went into the closet with G.I. Joes and Hot Wheels and everything else, and they vanished at some point. But then when I was in the 9th grade, Dad gives me this electric guitar for Christmas, and I was like, that's it,
So where is the guitar now?
So the 335 is behind glass at the Musicians Hall of Fame. It's on loan.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's on loan.
Because I just think that is probably something, not that your kids have ever mentioned it. I don't know if they have, but I would think that was something that would want to be passed down in the family.
Nobody mentions it. But I think because he has given me that guitar years ago, that going forward, I think the way I will handle this is whoever in the family this gets passed down to will either have it on display in the Musicians Hall of Fame, may it be that it stays, or the Country Music Hall of Fame. If he is ever inducted there, he should be. But, as far as those would be the two locations where whoever has the dobro, those guitars down the road, one or the other, and
Sure.
nowhere else. Mm-hmm. And it'd be like permanent loan or whatever. We'll figure that out. But so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know earlier you mentioned Garth Brooks. I'm really interested. How did you meet Garth? Because I know it's not just you, but also your brother is affiliated with him too. How did you guys meet?
Brian was actually using Garth Brooks to do demo sessions.
Okay.
When Garth came to Nashville. And then I remember Brian telling me, this guy's going to be huge. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's like anything else that you hear from somebody when they say that.
Yeah.
Okay. Really? Okay. And so then all of a sudden, this guy's huge, And in the early 90s, I'm working with a friend of mine named Wayne Kirkpatrick, and we're in the studio working on a project together. And we had produced 4 sides, trying to get a record deal, and had a developmental deal on hold, if you will, from a label in New York that lasted a little over a year, kept holding the carrot in front of us. Do this, and we'll sign you, and they never did. But in that window of time, though, we had produced these 4 tracks. And I'd given my brother Brian a cassette tape. You might want to do a show on what a cassette tape is.
Oh,
anyway.
That was my first form of music. So
I'm in the studio with Wayne after that fact. Some time goes by and Brian calls me and says, hey, Garth wanted me to tell you they got a speeding ticket driving through Arkansas, listening to White Flag off of your tape. And I said, okay, I'll put that on my resume. Hey, I don't have a cut by Garth Brooks, but he got a speeding ticket, So Garth, he's always, and Brian will tell you this first, he's always several steps ahead of whatever it is you think he's doing or that he's thinking. 7 or 8 years later, he records 3 of those 4 songs on the Chris Gaines album.
Mm-hmm.
So
wow.
He got a speeding ticket listening to a song that he was going to record 8 years later.
Wow.
So he keeps whatever up here.
A catalog of things that he.
So, and of course, but back then, that was, my first brush with Garth was the speeding ticket. Then he had me come in and play on a couple of songs. And I'm thinking this is all because he loves my brother Brian and we're family. And so he lets me come play on a session, and I played on the Fever, which was the rewritten of the Aerosmith song. And then I think the other song was something about back when the old stuff was new. And so I did 2 tracks, and then he ended up getting a hold of a song that I had written with a guy named Pierce Pettis called You Move Me. Mm-hmm. And Susan Ashton had done this record, and he heard her record, called her and asked her, can I do your song? She says, well, yeah. Who wrote that? He said, no. So that one was just
that was by just a happen chance.
So then that was another brush with Garth. And then in 99, he called me one day and said, hey, I want you to come in and play on a track on a record. And I'm going to put you in the room with this guy that just moved here from Australia. I think you guys will get along great. And it was Keith Urban.
Oh my.
So Keith and I got along so well in the studio that day, we almost forgot what we were there for. They're in the control room and we're in there talking about Eric Clapton and matchless amplifiers and Stratocaster or whatever, and they're like, hello, So we did the track together, and Garth, and if you know Garth, then you'll know I'm not lying when I say this, it's time to go to the car and haul your gear back, and he's picking the stuff up and walking to the car ahead of you. And then I'm about to say goodbye and leave, and he goes, oh, wait, I forgot I needed to tell you something else. Going to do a movie. Going to do a soundtrack to the movie. I'm going to do all the music. And he starts telling me the synopsis or the, whatever the short version of this movie that was going to be called The Lamb. And the artist in the movie is going to be murdered so that the catalog of the artist would be more valuable and all this stuff, And I need songs for that artist. And I said, so country? He goes, no, that other stuff that you do. And so I went back to the publishing company and made a CD of 10 or 12 songs, sent them over to where he was at, and then went to lunch and came back. When I came back from lunch, Katie, who was at the front desk, said, Garth called and put such song on hold. And I remember that was like the 3rd song on the CD. And in my mind, I was excited, but I also said, I would have sworn he would have picked the 5th song on the CD. And then about 15 minutes later, Garth called and put that song on hold. He was listening to them and putting them on hold as he was listening. So that's how the Chris Gaines project started. And just to kind of put a button on that story, for 20 years, he didn't mention that name.
No, yeah.
They beat him up so bad for trying to, I don't know, be more talented or something. Can't have that. So he didn't mention the name for 20 years until we were doing the stadiums tour, and he pulled me, into the show to do stadiums. You want to do 3 years of stadiums with me? Nah. No, yeah. When did we start? So, but in 2019, he said to me, well, it wasn't. It might have been the next year. Anyway, during the stadiums, he said, that Chris Gaines album? He said, that's his greatest hits, right? Yeah. Well, what albums did those hits come from? We need to do those albums. So I'm thinking, are you pulling my leg, you know? Well, last year, 2023, he announced, I'm going to do 5 more Chris Gaines albums. And he said, and I'm doing this for me, he said. So he's gotten over whatever that was that caused him to act like it never happened. And, you know, and I've had people near and dear to him, nearest and dearest to him, sidle up next to me when I've been out playing shows and get in my ear and go, you know, that's my favorite Garth Brooks album. Oh, no kidding. So, and I've always maintained that the people that heard it liked it. Everybody else hated it.
Well, because I was about to ask you, because how many, okay, I mean, obviously they're both the same person, but how many Garth Brooks cuts do you have?
On that one?
On a Garth Brooks album, not a Chris Gaines album.
Oh, I think it's around 15 or 16 songs total, but 10 of them were on that album.
So splitting it up, and I know this could be an unfair question, but I'm very interested. Are you more excited when you have a cut that is being released as Garth Brooks or more Chris Gaines?
I loved both. Anytime you have a song that now is available to be heard, you know, it's like you let it out the front door and now people will be aware of it. That's always exciting, no matter who does it.
Right.
The thing about the Chris Gaines thing was, you know, for a number of years, nobody in Nashville would listen to my songs, even Change the World, because it wasn't a Nashville song or the way somebody would describe it as a Nashville song. And even when I had a song years later done by Hornsby and Skaggs, the demo that I sent over at the request of Ricky, you know, does Gordon have any songs? I sent over a song, and when Hornsby saw the CD, he said, oh, this guy's pop, and put the CD aside and never even listened to it. He would later, and they did it. But, you know, I think for the longest time, you know, people would think of me because I was in a Christian rock band. And then even at the point where, you know, we had this Eric Clapton song or whatever, people would think this guy's pop, rock, or whatever.
Sure.
And I'm like, I'm countryer than anybody who says they're country in this town right now. I know. I grew up in this. So I'm just about doing good music. I would, you know, nobody got mad at Roger when his song crossed over, you know.
Yeah.
And when you listen to Roger Miller now, you go, is that country music or it's not country?
Well,
and Western?
it just changes so much.
People try to call it different things, but for the longest time, nobody would listen to my songs except for maybe the guy who was cutting my songs into the catalog in the basement over at was Welk Music, and then became Polygram, a guy named Doug Howard. So he would leave. I was writing there for 6 years. He left after I was there for about 5 years to go get his law degree, because he had a degree, master's. Now he's going to go get a law degree. The guy in the tape copy room.
Wow.
And so, but he was the guy that every time I would turn a song in at Polygram, Welk, then Polygram, he'd cue it up to cut it into the catalog, and then he would jump around the room doing the duck walk, Chuck Berry, and playing air guitar and just loving it. And I always thought, well, he likes it. He's the last guy that's going to hear it, but he likes it. Well, he would come back later and at the request of Colin Cornish, who was running Polygram worldwide, run the Nashville office. He went from the tape copy room to running the Nashville office in a matter of 2 or 3 years. I'm coming back to Polygram to run the Nashville office, he said, and I want you back over there because I like what you do. Duck walk, you know. And so first song I turned into him was Change the World. Now, Winona cut it first, but her label said the radio will never play this song. We were told it would be a single
when I read about with Change the World, and so we can just jump there now, is that it took a year to finish. Is that
her album? I went in.
The song itself.
She recorded the song. Oh, the writing of the song.
The writing of the song.
Yeah, it was a year because we didn't write together, and it was like a baton being passed.
So who out of the 3 of you was like, we're going to finish this?
We were all 3, Wayne, Tommy, myself, sitting in an isolation booth in a studio over at Quad, recording acoustic guitars together, all playing at the same time. And they radioed us from the control room, we've got a technical problem in here. It's going to be about 20 minutes. And in that window of time,
You finished?
Tommy says, fellas, is this an idea this group can do? Because, Wayne and I put this thing together trying to get a record deal. Is this something that would work with this act or group or whatever? I think he said group. So he played some changes and had a title, Change the World. I remember thinking in my head, well, that sounds enough like McCartney. I love it. And then later I thought, I bet Wayne was over there going, well, that sounds enough like James Taylor and Fogelberg. I love it. And Tommy was probably sitting there thinking, I hope this doesn't sound too much like Stevie Wonder for these guys or whatever. I just remember thinking there's such a wide scope of influences and the melting pot that were the three of us guys so Tommy ends up putting on a tape to give to Wayne, because Wayne asked him later, hey, what's that thing you played in the room that day? Put it on tape and give it to me. I'll work on it. And then he worked on it for a while. I think he wrote chorus, lyric, all but one line of what became the second verse, and then went dormant again.
Wow.
And at some point, I'm still trying to do one more session for the label in New York. My gosh, I'll send a song that they can't deny or whatever. Wayne, how far did you get with that? And so he gives me what he has. I finish the music and write lyrics to the first verse, his missing line from the second verse, drive to Columbus, Ohio to meet Tommy in this guy's basement where he was producing a church choir album. And we do the track for the demo, complete with all the percussion noises being sampled sounds like, and there's even a laugh at the end of every bar. There's a, and then I think all these different sounds, with a Shure 57 mic, get the keyboard parts down, bring the tracks back to Nashville, go back to Quad. No, go back to Omni, which now that's gone. And in the Omni B room, I put the acoustic guitar on and vocals.
And how did it get to Eric Clapton?
Well, so Winona, Doug Howard, that's the first song I turned in on my deal that I signed with Doug. Mm-hmm. And I said, can you get this to Eric Clapton? Well, see,
you had it in mind already.
Oh, that's because he had just done Tears in Heaven. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking, and the label in New York heard it, pass, we don't hear the hit. And so,
Did you think it was a hit?
To the point of where I asked my father, Dad, because he heard when I played him this demo, I said, have you ever been in the studio where when the echo died on the track or the song as it was going down, you said this is a hit? Mm-hmm. And I thought he was going to start rattling off a bunch of titles to me, and he only came up with two. One of them was Pretty Woman. He just, thought, oh, that's going to be a smash. And then the other one was when he recorded Chantilly Lace with Jerry Lee Lewis. He just thought, this is going to work, So, but I asked him when I played him the demo, because I kind of felt that way about that song, and it prompted me to ask him that question. Have you ever felt like this is a hit, I wanted to know for everything he'd ever heard and produced and played on. He came up with those two titles. But, so I had it in mind to pitch it to Eric Clapton. Well, that's like trying to find Batman or something. How do you get this song? So the publishing company went to work on pitching it, got it placed with Winona, and Tony Brown was going to produce. She wanted me to come sing the background vocals that I did on the demo, which I did. And Dan Huff played on the track, called me from the session, and he said, this is a hit. And we were told it was going to be a single. Well, the album, 2.5 years later, 2.5 years go by before they put the album out. And then we watched them put out 1, then 2, then 3 singles. None of them were ours. And I see Tony Brown walking on Music Row one day, comes up to me, he goes, man, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to tell you, but the label says they're not going to release that song, and that the radio will never play that song. So, there's all the times that you walk away from something, and many times just for this one song that we walked away going, we failed. But you always kind of just go back to work.
Yeah.
You don't fail and, tear down your tent and go away.
Right. Mm-hmm.
No, you just kind of keep going. And So the summer of 96, I'm sitting in the studio with Tommy, and he casually, of course, everything Tommy says is casual. GK, by the way, we're getting another cut on Change the World. I said, really, who? And he goes, Eric Clapton. And I was like, what? I don't know. I stared at him for 2 minutes. He goes, yeah, it's going to be a single from the soundtrack for this movie. He said it was a Tom Hanks movie, which was not right. It was John Travolta. And he said that, yeah, it's going to be a single and the whole thing. Well, I think maybe within a few weeks, I had a cassette tape once again, went out in my car, popped it in, and sat there and listened to the intro. And the first thing that hit me was, oh, man, they slowed it down. And then I'm listening, and then it goes across my mind, I've grown up listening to this guy, and I'm listening to that voice.
Sing your song.
Yeah. And so when it ends, I can't do anything but just start falling out laughing. I'm laughing, and I know people, if they could see me in my car, thinking, what's wrong with this guy? And I played it 3 or 4 more times and laughed. And then at some point, maybe on the 4th run through, I'm saying, these guys have made a killer record. This is incredible. So, and then what happened after that happened. But the way it got to Clapton, which is what you asked me, was Tony Brown in his office with the demo, had a visit from Kathy Nelson, who they're pals, but she's a music supervisor on the West Coast. You see her name on a lot of Touchstone pictures and a lot of those Jerry Bruckheimer blockbuster films, Con Air, Armageddon. She comes to visit Tony in his office here in Nashville, and on a lark, he plays her. Listen to this song, I'm Gonna, recorded with Winona, and plays her the demo. So evidently she remembered that. When some months to a year, or I don't know how long rolls by, she's casting music for Phenomenon. Gets to the scene where they're going back a year after the main character has passed on and having like a memorial. And what's that song I heard in Tony's office? So she set about seeking out that demo, got it, put it in the hands of Robbie Robertson, who exec produced the soundtrack album, who concocts that it should be Babyface and Clapton. So I've got a video somewhere of Clapton saying, I loved the composition, and I said, sure, I'd love to do it.
Wow.
So that's how it got into his hands.
And what goes through your mind when you hear that it's nominated for a Grammy?
Well, it was, November later that year, I think it was that it rolled out, and it's nominated for 3. Pop, male vocal, song, record. And song and record are 2 of the big 4.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're like, already the thing that crossed our minds first, we 3 writers, is that how cool is this that we're going to New York City and get to have our wives experience the fruit of what we do.
Sure.
That's the only thing that went through our mind first. Because we thought, we're not winning.
I was about to say, did you think you were going to win?
No. We had our suspicions as to who we thought would win, to the point of where I went there and I didn't have anything planned to say, if we won. So, but yeah, and then of course, the thing that I remember most about that time is coming home from church every Sunday and turning on Casey Kasem Countdown. And for 13 weeks or something, it was always the #1 song, and my kids dancing in front of the speakers, and this was, going on, for weeks. So we were kind of just like, I'd be watching TV and, MTV at the time, when it was still MTV, and saying, and they'd be talking about the Grammys coming up, and what's funny is Babyface is competing with himself as a songwriter in the Song of the Year category, because he wrote Shoop Shoop Exhale and Changed the World by Eric Clapton, and we were like, no, that was not. And then we went there, thinking it's not for us to win this thing, because that was the 39th annual Grammy Awards that year that we went, and the Song of the Year came from Nashville, songwriting capital of the world, once before that.
Really? Only once?
One time in the previous 38 years, the song of the year came from Nashville songwriters. So
Wow.
we just didn't think that was going to happen. But yeah.
Well, speaking of Nashville, what is your favorite thing about Nashville today and your least favorite thing about Nashville today versus the past?
I still think that the appreciation for the songwriter exists greatly in this town like nowhere else. Mm-hmm. The respect for the songwriter, because of if for no other reason, NSAI and the Bluebird Cafe, just those two names right there to me are on some world-class scope level compared to the rest of the world as far as the respect for songwriters goes. So I think of Nashville as far as how it's retained that. Mm-hmm. And then the thing that is harder about Nashville, other than the traffic,
Very true.
But I even try to tell myself when I'm sitting in the middle of traffic that, you know what, I still think special things come out of this town. And if whatever that special thing about this town is still special about this town, mm-hmm. No wonder people are drawn to this town. So let them come, and maybe at some point we as the music community or we, the songwriting community, will deliver something that it'll be obvious as to why people are still drawn to this town. But I would say the thing that, if there's anything that I would feel like not as excited about, would be sort of a sense of the loss of the community that was when my dad was doing it. Mm-hmm. He said you could walk out the front door and look to your left and right and you would know the people that were running those labels. The people that were running those labels were also each one musicians, songwriters, producers, and executives, mm-hmm. all at the same time. They were running the A&R. They were, producing records. They were great musicians. I mean, Billy Sherrill and my dad and, my gosh, Chet Atkins at RCA, say no more. That's who was running the labels then.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think some of that kind of is lost these days.
And if you could relive one moment all over again that you've already lived in this industry, what would it be?
I'm going to say, and I have gotten to work with just the most unbelievably great people, the people that I was a fan of, and the getting to work with them is always kind of a surreal moment. I got to meet Paul McCartney at one point some years back, and I remember thinking, to caption the picture underneath would say Sir Paul and Sir Real. Under me would be Sir Real, because it was just that kind of I've been able to meet people like that, work with some giants, but there was one project that if I could carve that back out of time and relive it all again, it would probably be the entire album that I did with Ricky Skaggs, okay, called Mosaic. Mm-hmm. And if you've never listened to that whole album, listen to the entire record. The music speaks for itself, but then the experience of making the music would be something I would want to live every day, again and again and again, the rest of my life. If I could have that kind of Groundhog Day thing where just let it loop, it would be that. It would be that, because I see that time in my life as a time when God was not so veiled in mystery, but making himself more obvious, mm-hmm. to the point of where we would walk into the studio every day and kind of start looking around and listening for like, what's going to happen today? There was something that was going on that would happen every single day that would make us either laugh or cry or just, just be amazed. So it was a season of life where we just were enjoying this presence like I've never experienced before or since.
I always ask towards the end of an interview my guest a question the previous guest asks me to ask my next guest. What a tongue twister there.
So do they know it's me, or
no,
it's
they do not.
Question to ask the next guest,
mm-hmm.
whoever it is?
So my last guest wanted me to ask my next guest, why are you still here in Nashville?
Okay. Well, I've been here since I was 14 months old. It's home. I will always feel this connection to it. Had I chosen some other direction in my life, I might not. But because it's music, that I always feel like this is, as much as Ireland under my feet felt like I felt my, ancestors, I feel the purpose and the why of my life was birthed in this town, and it still is the place where I can launch anything that I have credible to do going forward from this town better than anywhere else. Still, I don't know. It's home, but it also made me, in so many ways. Had I grown up somewhere else, I don't imagine I would be quite the same as I am now. For better or worse, it takes the blame and a lot and the credit too. But I don't know. I think that's kind of how I feel about this place.
And what would you like me to ask my next guest? If I could ask them one question, it can be music industry related. It could not be. It could be controversial. It could not be. Whatever it is.
I think on the heels of what you just asked me, I would say, do you know your why? I think that's a good question to ask anybody.
That's a great question.
Yeah. Do you know your why? Because I sit in front of Belmont students or groups of songwriters that are trying to, learn the craft or learn the business or be whichever, and just ask them, if you know why. Because I say to Belmont students, I've sat where you're sitting, and you're probably asking yourself the same questions I ask myself. Then, why am I here? Where am I going from here? And do you want to be rich and famous? You want to be a star? It's all well and good, or is this a calling that's on your life, no matter what? So I encourage people to sort of investigate that as to where they fall.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you, Gordon, so much for being on What's
My
Mine
pleasure,
Is Yours.
Tiffany.
I honestly think the stories you have are unlike most of my other guests, and so I'm glad to have you sitting here to share some of those. So thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.